Welcome to a special bonus episode of No Password Required. I'm your host, Jack Clabby, a cybersecurity attorney at Carlton Fields, PA. With me, as always, is Kaylee Melton, a cybersecurity mercenary and the Bob Ross of InfoSec. Today, we're joined by our friend Tanya Janca, one of only 3 two-time guests we've had on the show, alongside Alan Liska and Roger Grimes. That makes her return even more exciting. Tanya is the head of education and community at Semgrep. But today she's here to talk about the upcoming release of her new book, Alice and Bob Learn Secure Coding. It's a follow-up to her bestseller, Alice and Bob Learn Application Security. This latest book dives deeper into building secure software from the ground up. Tanya, welcome back to No Password Required.
Welcome to No Password Required, a monthly conversation that introduces you to some of the top talent in the world of cybersecurity.
All right, so after they learned application security, Alice and Bob are back. This time they're taking on secure coding. Can you tell us why Alice and Bob Learn Secure Coding was the next step in their cybersecurity learning journey, Tanya?
So it sounds weird, but I focused at first on application security because that's what I was learning and that was the career I was building. And I felt like there were no books on that topic. There weren't any really. And so I started with that. But then as I started teaching a lot, so I teach secure coding and I opened an academy. And it became clear that without software developer buy-in, it does not matter how many AppSec engineers we have or how many hours we work, we're not going to win this battle. And so I looked around at all the different secure coding books and I'm like, there's lots of good ones that dive into one language or a different language. But a lot of them didn't cover the secure SDLC. They didn't cover multiple languages. They didn't cover kind of that agnostic information that applies to every single language. And so people kept asking me, are you going to write another book? And I felt like I really needed this. And as I was doing lots of training, people kept asking, like, can you do a deep dive on Python or this or that? And so I was like, well, if I'm going to do lots and lots of research, I should probably share it with more than just like 1 or 2 clients. I should go big or go home, right?
One thing I noticed too is that the Alice and Bob cutaways cover like a wide variety of their professional and educational experiences. That's a big interest of ours on the podcast, and I know for Cyber Florida. What was a little bit of the strategy behind that approach to the cutaways?
So I am Alice and I am Bob. And Bob's sort of me until about age 30, 31. And then Alice is me after that. Okay. So a lot of these stories are things that happened to me or things that I saw happen at various ages. And I tried to kind of mix Alice and Bob up a little bit so it's not always me in my 30s or my 40s. But in the second book, one of my technical editors said I was being very negative about governance, risk, and compliance teams. And I said, yeah, you're right, because my experience of them through the Canadian government was very unorganized or disorganized. I forget, one of those is not really a word.
You're the author, Tanya. We're taking your word for it.
That's right.
And I found a lot of the situations really frustrating. So I actually met with all these different governance, risk, and compliance folks to get a lot of more positive stories of ways that governance, risk, and compliance can actually be really wonderful and very effective. So some of the stories, if you see like a little citation, those actually didn't happen to me. Those were one of my GRC friends. Oh, wow. Because I know it can be good. I just didn't get to experience that quite yet. But one day.
That's because like, GRC has a wide spread at the ends. Like there are a fair amount of people who do GRC who got into it, don't really know what they're doing. No offense. But then there are people who are really, really, really good. I've never met someone who's average.
Yeah. Yeah, and they can do really great things and they can work really well with software developers if they understand where they're coming from, right? I think it's a lot about talking and seeing where we can be effective, which I tried to show in the book. Like, Alice got quite upset about a couple of things. She went to the GRC team, and then they were reasonable. Isn't that wild?
Well, I know, Tanya, you have such an extensive background in national security and counterterrorism. How did that real-world experience kind of shape some of the lessons and the stories in Alice and Bob Learn Secure Coding, particularly when it comes to like everyday developers having to understand the importance of secure coding?
I feel like my experience in the Canadian government, being able to work at multiple departments and being first in software development and then switching to the side of security, it really opened my eyes to why some things don't work. Okay. Why some processes might be janky or why people would behave or react in certain ways. And so I tried really hard with this book to explain things with that in mind, especially the third part of the book, which is the system development lifecycle, but not from the security person's experience, from the software development person experience who's having it happen to them. Mm-hmm. So it's like, I'm invited to a threat model. What the heck is that? What's it going to be like? How do I prepare? How do I look smart in this meeting? And I wanted to try to help them sort of understand where the security person's coming from, what's expected of them, and also prepare them for it could be awesome, it could be not awesome. Like I talk about, hopefully you get a security report and it's delivered to you the way all your bugs are, and it's prioritized and all of the results are validated and they're real findings and this and this. But that might not be what happens. There's other things that could happen. And I give them, some other options and then how they can react effectively. And one of the suggestions in the book is like, if you're getting the bugs from the security team in a way that's really annoying or frustrating or unhelpful, tell them how you normally get bugs, how you would prefer to receive them, and then better yet, help them automate it because they probably just don't know how. Like a lot of security folks have never coded and they don't even understand, I could just write a little script that does this, or, oh, wow, there's probably an integration. And if I press a couple buttons, like they're often not from a super technical background. And so they don't always know that these things are possible. I'm like, so just tell them, yeah, I'll just do it for you. And they'll probably just get out of your way.
I also like that framework of like preparing for a meeting that might be uncomfortable. Here's some tips on make it less uncomfortable. Just that idea of like, this is a real world application and this is real world guidance done.
Yeah. Also, I wanted them to know how they can add value and look really good, because I think a lot of people want to one day be a senior developer. And if you're the person that everyone comes to for advice, that's a really good way to become a senior developer. And if the security team's like, oh, we know we can count on Rex or Jax, like it just changes the way things are. And so it's like, these are things that they'd really love to see or hear from you.
And if you wrote a little script that helps, that helps the security engineer provide you, or the security analyst provide you with better information more quickly or in a more organized way, they're also going to remember that, right? Mm-hmm. If you're saving steps and cutting things out, you're going to be their favorite person.
Exactly. Well, and then later your life's better, right? If you've automated a bunch of things, if you've proactively done a bunch of security work at the end, I love the idea of at the end of the project, the pen tester is sitting there struggling to try to find something wrong. I'm like, whoa.
That may not be a bad pen tester. It's a good product, right?
Yeah.
At some point, you're allowed to conclude it's a pretty good product.
Mm-hmm.
So I know you're planning on some kind of innovative connection points here to coincide with the release of the book. So what are some strategies, or what are you planning on doing into 2025 that may, add some value?
So I'm planning to do a couple of things. So the main big thing I'm doing is I'm going to hold live streams for every single chapter of the book, where I invite friends on, just like I did for the first book, to talk about the chapter, what's in it, to discuss various topics and hopefully argue a little bit, because that makes it fun when not everyone agrees. And then we're going to answer all the questions at the back of each chapter. And some of the questions are true or false, but a lot of them are discussion points, like which security requirements would you add to your project or whatever. And being able to hear a whole bunch of people who are experts in each topic discuss, I think will be really fun. It was super fun last time. And then I'm going to host them forever on my YouTube channel, just like the last book. And then I'm also going to make a whole ton of cheat sheets. So basically, there's a whole section on React. There should be a React cheat sheet that you can just download. And so I'm going to do what I did last time, where if you subscribe to my newsletter, you get some of the cheat sheets to try to, one, spread the message, but two, also get some people to join my newsletter, and then my newsletter will invite you to the streams. It's all an evil plan, really.
It's not evil, it's helpful. It's helpful.
Yeah. Is there anyone specific you're looking forward to arguing with?
Oh, yes. So my friend Adam Shostak's going to come on. He was on last time. So I have this big section on threat modeling, which I'm really excited about, and he's really excited about. But I've actually met a lot of people who are into threat modeling since the first book. So I'm going to invite a bunch of people on, like, there's this guy named Izar, another person named Kim Wutz, another person named Avi, who are experts in their field. And if I can figure out how to get them all on the same stream, I think it would be so fascinating to see a lot of really smart people dissect my chapter and just be like, I don't know about this part. It sounds weird, but having different people explain something different ways, it's a better way for the audience to learn. And so usually the streams are 2 or 3 hours long, which I realize is really long. However, you can watch them in pieces however you want. I started doing them for the first book because this sounds really weird, but I was hoping universities would pick up the book. All the universities I contacted said, yes, you can absolutely come be an adjunct professor. We will pay you less than minimum wage because you don't have a PhD, so you're not a real person.
Oh my gosh.
You haven't fed into a pyramid scheme. And then after you'll work a zillion hours basically for free, we will own all your intellectual property. And I was like, wow, that's such appealing as an offer. No, thank you. Instead of doing it almost for free, I will do it completely for free. Like, they offered me $4,000 for 4 months work, Canadian. So that's less than 3,000 American dollars.
Wow.
And they'd own all my, I just like, what? What are you talking about?
Yeah.
So if you're going to do something almost for free, why not do it for free and do it on your terms and make it better? And so there'll be 15 lectures. So it'll take more than just 2025 to complete it. But that's okay. I have lots of time.
Did you engage in any pre-publishing arguments?
Oh my gosh, yes, my technical editors. So you get technical editors to help you sound smart. And I have 3 technical editors, and I wanted different types of people to help keep me, first of all, smart sounding, but also honest, and to make sure I have the perspective I think I do. So one's a software developer, one's an AppSec person, and one's a security architect. And so between the 3 of them, they helped me make sure that if I was talking about the developer perspective, it really was, because I haven't done full-time development in 11 years now. And so I'm like, oh, I'm a developer at heart, but am I still? Do I really still have that perspective? Like, am I on target when I think I am? So there was a lot of them say, like, it was one of my technical editors that was like, you're really hating on the GRC people. I feel like there's got to be some positivity there, Missy. I'm like, you're right, Fab. You're right. They're so wonderful. I really, really like my 3 technical editors.
That's awesome. And so implied trust is an important concept in cybersecurity, especially because people naturally operate with a level of implied trust, which gets us into all sorts of trouble. So what are some strategies for turning this perceived weakness into a strength?
Oh, I love that. I love the way you asked that too. So implied trust is why our society works, right? Because if all of us had no trust all the time, so for instance, earlier today, a FedEx person wearing a Santa hat knocked on my door and she's like, I have a package for you. I'm like, great. And she's like, but you owe money because it crossed the border and that person didn't pay it. And I'm like, okay, do you have like a thing? And she's like, no, you just have to give me your credit card numbers. And I'm like, I think we both know that's not happening. And she's like, that's okay. You can go online and pay on the site. That's all official. I totally get it. She's like, good job. Most people just do it.
Oh, man.
But if we had no trust, I wouldn't have even opened the door despite her wonderful smiling face and cute Santa hat. And then I wouldn't have my little weird gift that I got. So it was a surprise. It was quite a surprise. I spoke at an AI conference and they gave me an AI sidekick buddy. And I'm like, seems kind of like you sent me a spy, but that's okay.
Right.
A little weird. That's fine. I'll put it in my Faraday bag. It'll be great. But anyway, if we want to practice not trusting, there's a bunch of things we can do. So we can learn about threat modeling. It sounds weird, but as you learn it, it becomes muscle memory, sort of, where you start to see threats where you didn't previously realize. But another thing we can do, which I had never done when I was a software developer so many years ago, is make a list of all your inputs and then walk someone else through them and be like, so these are the places where these things connect, right? Can we make sure I'm doing all the security control things I think I am and that I should be doing? And by walking through someone else or walking someone else through it, I personally find I'm like, oh, I forgot this, I forgot that. Oh, this could be better, blah, blah, blah. Even if they're not a security person, just as the two of you talk about it, it's like, hey, could this go wrong? So even two software developers that have no security experience, one explaining it to the other, I'm sure all of you have experienced this, where you go to your buddy where you work and you're like, hey, I'm having this problem, this and this. And you're like, the light bulb goes off, you rush back to your desk and fix your bug, right? But if you have a security person, they will have a whole bunch of ideas for you. And the more times you do this, the easier it is to realize, oh, I just put implied trust there, didn't I? I just assumed everything would be fine. Yeah. Just like when I opened that virus from my mom when I was young.
Is that a real story?
Yeah. In the first book, I say, trust no one, not even your mom. And then I tell the story of how I got an email and it was from my mom. And normally I wouldn't open up, document dot whatever, but it was from my mom. And it didn't really work out as well as it could have. Oh, Tanya, you did so well.
So speaking of secure practices, secure coding, obviously when we're talking about secure coding, OWASP is going to be brought up at some point, or as it should be anyway. And you talk a lot about implementing that as a framework for secure coding practices in your book. Can you share a little more about your experience with OWASP and why it's crucial for ensuring secure application development?
I love the OWASP community. So OWASP is an international nonprofit, but it's also a giant community full of beautiful chapters, like over 300, maybe close to 400 now. And then also over 100 open source projects. They publish free books. They're amazing. And their most famous project is called the OWASP Top 10. And those are risks to web apps. And I find that document helpful to start the conversation. But sometimes people are like, well, I did those 10 things. Like, oh, no, there's way more than 10.
Right.
That's the problem with lists. People think when they do the list, then they're done. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Whereas they have a whole bunch of really cool things. Like there's the security knowledge framework that have, it's sort of like a little web app that you install. And then it has tons of different secure coding samples in Java and .NET, which is super helpful. They have a security testing guide, a mobile security testing guide. They have ASVS, the Application Security Verification Standard, which is great if you're a pen tester. You will destroy many apps with that guidance. I think one of my favorite things from OWASP, so I used to have my own project called the OWASP DevSlop project, and you would think that that would be my favorite project, but it's my second favorite project. My first favorite project are the OWASP cheat sheets. And I'm sorry if you can hear my printer in the background. It suddenly decided it needed to do something. But basically, there's over 100 little cheat sheets on various topics. So let's say you're going to do a file upload, which is pretty risky business if you are letting the public upload files to your app. It could be anything, including bad things. And so they have a full cheat sheet of all the things to check and do. And they have one for authentication, authorization, how to avoid cross-site scripting, how to test very thoroughly for cross-site scripting. So if you are a software developer and you have a bug and it's like, you have this, if you just search Google or wherever, I'm a DuckDuckGo person, and you search OWASP, and then whatever the thing is, the results, the quality of the results will go up because, oh yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great tip.
One of them even made an LLM that you can chat with that's trained on all of the OWASP stuff, right?
That's incredible.
These humans are awesome.
Yeah. I've had to strategize and help create content for OWASP in the past for kind of like a general audience. So I'm honestly in awe of the fact that you've been able to create a book based on this without having to dive too deeply into, whether it's Java or, my brain. They all just left my brain. But yes. So kudos.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And so speaking of complexities, let's bring it over to the user side a little bit now that we've talked about, how we can create secure experiences on the coding side. How are we doing? Have we figured out yet how to design secure systems that are not only effective, but also user-friendly, that users can use without feeling overwhelmed?
That's such a great question because today I was trying really hard to pay my taxes and I logged into my bank and I was like, show me a void check so that I can put all the information in to the tax thing so that it can take me. And it protected me by hiding them.
Okay.
Yeah, like hiding them to the point where I was completely unable to find them. Like I literally couldn't. And then it was like a new version of the website. So then I go back to the classic version and then I couldn't find them there either. So I actually had to dig through old files of an invoice I sent someone to find my branch number because they'd obfuscated the branch number. And I was just like, how is this helping me? Like I'm logged into my account. I did MFA. I did all the dancing that you wanted me to. I jumped through all the little good hoops like a good girl. And now I want to be able to pay my tax bill, please. And so I ended up having to log out of everything, go find it in this old invoice, and then be able to pay my bill. And I was just like, wow, some security teams are trying really hard to help. They're trying really hard to protect us. And they're making it so that we can't use the systems the way we need to. And so they had put this little I. So I pressed the I and then I could see my full account number, but I was unable to find my branch number no matter what I did. And I was just like, oh my. And I was trying to look it up on the internet and they're like, we don't publish our branch numbers to protect you. And I was like, thanks for protecting me from paying my own taxes.
Right.
So I'm one day late and hopefully the fees won't be too bad. So I don't think we're doing that well yet. I don't think we're doing great on usability. I think some of us are. Like, for instance, I use 1Password as my password manager. I think they've made it as usable as it can possibly be. However, at work, we have it implemented, and I use 1Password at home. I know it's great, but we have it implemented such that it goes through Okta and then it goes through some other thing and then some other thing. And I have to re-authenticate like literally several times every single day.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm just like, come on, guys. This is the 6th time that I'm authenticating to Okta, and it's not Okta. It's the chaining of the 6 things together that is the problem, right? And I'm not complaining about my internal security team. They are wonderful. Go Jonathan, go Andy. But they worked really hard to make it less bad. Like, that's the better version. And so we still have a lot of work to do. I also think that I'd rather us work on not having data breaches all the time. Like, I'm sure you've seen over and over again these giant, huge security breaches. We actually don't hear about most of them. There was an article recently in the CBC. So I'm Canadian. That's the accent you hear. At some point, I will say a boot. The Canadian Tax Office apparently had 42 breaches, and they had only reported 2 or 3 of them. And then it got found out by the public. Public's pretty ticked, including me. We should be being notified if you are losing our citizens' data, especially if we are one of those citizens. And so when we see things in the public, especially if it's in a news article, it's usually because it's quite interesting and unique. There's actually tons of breaches happening literally constantly. And if it doesn't include customer data, they don't legally have to tell us. So you better believe it. They are not telling us.
Wow.
Like, there are breaches constantly happening at companies. And I want that to not be the norm. I want to be highly unusual that there is one. And so I feel like, although we're working very hard and things are improving, I feel like malicious actors are keeping pace in a way that I am not very satisfied with yet, which is why I wrote this book, because I want us to kick their butts. I want it to be super rare. I want ransomware and all of those things to be a thing of the past, just like how spam used to be really, 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 really bad, right? And it's improved greatly, right? A lot of people worked really hard on that. So, I'm trying to help.
That's awesome. If only the Canadian government had a best-selling author to help them get their systems in order.
I actually I went to Ottawa, the capital, a few weeks ago and spoke at a conference there, and there were tables from the various places. And so I gave my card to all these different groups, and I was like, I'll help you write a secure code and guideline for the whole government for free if you'll actually enforce it. Because I wrote the web security policy for the tax office when I worked for them. They don't follow it. They don't. I have not pen tested their systems since I left, so I don't know what detail, but I can just like look at the requests and responses and see, like, I'm not seeing the security headers that I wrote into the policy. It's policy. It's not a guideline. It's a you must do, not a you'll do it if you feel like it. So I've put the offer out there like repeatedly, and I'm really annoying. So I'll just keep writing letters to the Prime Minister's office.
That's incredible, though.
I write letters to the tax office and tell them I don't like their security, and then they don't answer. And then I write the Prime Minister's office and tell on them for not answering. And then they answer, but they deny. And eventually when I have enough, maybe there'll be this amazing blog article. They're in my book. They star in my book. They shouldn't have lost my parents' personal information and identities on the internet. It made me angry.
Yeah. One thing I know for sure, and it's don't tick off someone in cybersecurity.
Because they will write letters about you to the Prime Minister. They will critique your policies publicly.
Exactly.
I mean, at least I'm not like malicious. I'm just like really annoying.
Right.
Or persistent, some people have said. I could use that word instead.
Yes, persistent.
Determined.
So as an educator, what do you think is the most challenging and sophisticated methods that it's important to teach developers to defend against?
Oh, I would say if we could get one single thing right, it would be validating every single thing that we receive to our system before we take any action. And so if you're using a stack analysis tool, we call those sources and sinks. But basically, every time you connect, hey, am I connecting to who I think I'm connecting to? And do I have do you have permission to use my system? Cool beans. You can come in. Oh, hey, you gave me some input, a search term. That's nice. Let me check that it's within the parameters of what I should be getting. Does not have anything, it should not have. Cool. You may come in. I feel like we don't realize that these things could be changed on us. Like quite often developers will put things in a hidden field. I'm like, it's not hidden from me. That's the first place I'm going to look. And so if we were able to validate every single thing before in French, we say we take a decision. In English, we say we make one, but I like how it's aggressive. We take it in French.
Yeah.
If before we take this decision, we are sure that it's safe to use the thing, like all of the vulnerabilities on the internet would just be done. Like, I know that sounds like a huge simplification, and it is. But if we mapped out all these things, we talked them out, maybe we draw them. I'm not an illustrator by any means, but I really love drawing things out on whiteboards. You take a little picture with your phone, you're like, cool, I did documentation today, right? Like, but you write it out, you draw circles, you point, you can erase things. And then before you know it, you're like, oh, there's like 5 places where I forgot a security control. Crap. Because we review code and then we see, oh, they took the thing, they used it, and then they checked it. Darn, that's not the right way, right? But it's always a mistake. It's never a developer being lazy or not caring. It's always like, oh, I have 12 bugs I got to fix today by lunch or else, right? Or I'm going to have to stay really late because I have these 4 features that are due by the end of the week. It's usually a lot of pressure, or it's just a mistake. They just didn't know. So I feel like that's one of the main things that we need to focus on. I feel that a lot of security folks try to make developers memorize tons and tons and tons of names of vulnerabilities. And I kind of feel like that's a waste of time. And I do have an entire chapter about vulnerability categories so that developers can understand how they work, why they're scary, how to fix them, which is good, right? But I'm like, I don't want you memorizing some CVEs. Your brain has only so much information, and I'd much rather you memorize how to encode something so that you do it every time, or that we should make one encoder for our app and all of the functions feed in, just call this function, right? Rather than writing it over and over. I've seen this many times where, like, why do we have 3 validators, 3 different validation functions? One of them's broken.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Tanya, I want to thank you so much for coming on today. If folks, where can folks buy Alice and Bob Learn Secure Coding?
So you can buy it at Amazon, Indigo, Barnes & Noble, directly from my publisher, Wiley. If you go to my website, SheHacksPurple.ca, there's a section that says My Books. And if you click on that, I have every single place that it's for sale because, for instance, if you're in India, you want to get it at a different place than if you live in Canada. And I want everyone to be able to get it. But Wiley will ship it to anywhere in the world, they have assured me. So that is always an option.
Well, thank you so much, Tanya.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me. It's been such a pleasure.
For the entire No Password Required team, I'm Jack Clabby. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk again soon.
Thank you for listening to the No Password Required podcast. You can find us on social media at No Password Pod. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe to the No Password Required podcast. And if you know someone who might like it, please share it with them. The show is produced by Cyber Florida. And a special thank you goes out to our friends at Carlton Fields. If you'd like to learn more, visit our website, cyberflorida.org/pod. All opinions expressed by the No Password Required podcast participants are their own and do not exclusively represent the views and opinions of Cyber Florida.